Welcome. This is the Our Savior's Lutheran Church Capital Campaign introduction, presented originally at the quarterly meeting on May 4th. We've been able to produce it here in this video form to be placed on our website so that anyone who wasn't able to join us on May 4th can still have the benefit of the information contained. Our theme for the Capital Campaign is Built on Tradition, Embracing the Future. The buildings that we currently use were built in 1951 and 1957. In fact, the educational wing was dedicated just this past month in April of 1951, making it now 63 years old. A few years later, in 1957, our present sanctuary, fellowship hall, and the basement structures underneath those areas was dedicated in February. Thus, that building is now 57 years old. It was a state-of-the-art building at that time. It was one of the first sanctuaries in La Crosse to have an air-conditioned sanctuary. It had a dimming system for the lighting in the sanctuary, and had a beautiful pipe organ that continues to provide us wonderful leadership for our singing in worship. But those facilities have become older and have needed maintenance, and over the past 6 years our church councils considered a number of needed projects. Some of those were projects that you might consider just enhancements for our ministry and facility, good ideas, but nonetheless just enhancements, while others of them were things that we knew we would eventually need to do. But given the lack of funding for those projects, they were not developed, not implemented, and represented deferred maintenance. Typically, the reason that such projects were not pursued was a concern that we really didn't have the funds to make that project come to reality. Then, with our sesquicentennial celebration in 2011, many of us looked back and developed a good deal of pride in where we'd come over the more than a century of ministry here in La Crosse. As well, there were those that also looked forward and said, gosh, if we've done this over the past 150 years, what will we be doing in the upcoming 150 years, or even just 50 years? So after some discussions in that regard, a committee chair and committee were formed in the fall of 2013, and the members of that committee include Bob and Carol Miller, longtime members of Our Savior's, Sheila Zentner, a relative newcomer to Our Savior's, but one who's quite involved, and a number of ex officio members, President Chris Kruger, Treasurer Dennis Baer, Pastor Mark Jolivet, and myself as committee chair. I also chair our Board of Stewardship. So we began our process as a committee with some study in December of 2013. We collected and annotated the projects that had been considered over the last years by the council, and came to realize that some of those projects involved a substantial investment in our now 63-year-old 1951 building. And until we were confident of what the future was for that building, we felt that we would have a difficult time prioritizing projects. Thus, we began to look at some previous work that had been done in the 1994 to 96 time frame towards long-range strategic planning, a very careful analysis that a number of you had been involved in, that really looked at our congregation and what our facility needs would be for the future. That project, that strategic planning effort resulted in a major renovation plan developed by then Shute and Larson architects. It was the vision of what our Division Street side of the church would look like based on that plan. This is an architect's conception that included our existing sanctuary, the stained glass windows and spire, and over here, a chapel that would replace our existing chapel, and here an overhang that would allow car drop-off of members coming to worship without their needing to get wet in the rain. The floor print of that renovation included this loop off of Division Street here to get underneath the carport, but really left the fellowship hall and the sanctuary essentially unchanged. Only a couple of skylights were added to the sanctuary. The fellowship hall was left unchanged with the exception of removal of the stage. You can see here on the alley side there was a good deal of difference, and we'll blow this section of that plan up for a little easier visibility. So the alley runs along here, and there was an entrance directly off of the alley so that those parking in the east parking lot could have more easy direct access to the church. There was a bigger chapel. Our present chapel will hold on the order of 20 people. This, as you can see, was designed to hold something on the order of 100 people. There was a larger, fully accessible bathroom included, and interestingly, an elevator. With the 1951 building present, we have 6 levels in our facility that need to have handicapped accessibility support. So one of the beauties of this plan is the fact that with the 1951 building removed, there's then only 3 levels that need accessibility, all of which could then be served with a single elevator. So having seen this plan, we recognize that anything of this scale, now 20 years later, would require a very careful analysis of who we were as a congregation, and that analysis would be a project much bigger than we were as a capital campaign committee. So with that need, we felt that there were other projects that we needed to move forward sooner rather than later, and those projects, for the most part, couldn't wait for us to re-embark upon a strategic planning process that might take by itself a couple of years. So with that recognition, we thought it best to move forward with identifying projects that wouldn't involve further investment in the 1951 building. We also studied how to proceed with a capital campaign. What should be the fundraising strategies used to implement a capital campaign? Well, the first thing that we looked at was the history of capital campaigns at Our Savior's. The most recent one, 7 or 8 years ago, had set a goal of $180,000 and had exceeded that goal by 20% without the use of a capital campaign fundraising professional. We did subsequently visit with a number of capital campaign professionals and discovered that the fees associated with their involvement would range from a low of about 2% to 3 or 4% of the funds raised, and we felt that was an unnecessary expense for our project. So we've chosen, as you can see by this presentation and the brochures that will accompany it on the website, that this is another homegrown capital campaign, one that we're very enthusiastic about, one that we think we can succeed at without the added expense of a fundraising professional. Well, we spent a good deal of time studying the multiple projects that had been considered over the past several years, and ultimately this is the list of projects that we've chosen to include in this campaign. Pipe organ maintenance and renovation, enhancing the sanctuary lighting, replacement of windows in the fellowship hall and kitchen, a new marquee signs that are more welcoming in the front yard and along the 7th Street side, purchasing some technology that would allow us to, like this presentation, stream our worship services for others, and finally remodeling our front restrooms on the main hallway such that they would become accessible. In the next few slides, we'll look at some of the details of those projects and the anticipated costs. So the pipe organ you've heard us talk about for some time. I'd given a presentation in more detail about the pipe organ back in August of 2013. One of the critical maintenance pieces is replacing the leather on these control bellows that are within our organ. There's several thousand of those bellows that are now 57 years old, and have leather that's starting to show its age and needs to be replaced. So those bellows would need to come out of the organ, be taken to the organ builder's shop, have the leather replaced, and then reinstalled. A fairly major project. Another element of our organ maintenance and renovation is the computerization of the electronic controls. This is the back of our present console. You can see that there's a tangle net of switches, wires, and relays that allow that organ to play and use the appropriate group of pipes at the appropriate time. Those wires and switches are now 57 years old and are coming to the end of their expected life. And this past Christmas, when we had a B flat that would play when we didn't want it to incessantly, we all expected that it would be the leather on one of the control bellows that had failed. But what we found was that it had in fact been one of the switches inside the organ, because we were able to fix it by simply using a Swiss Army knife to disconnect a single wire back inside the organ, leading us to understand that a switch or a wire had failed. By computerizing that whole system, we end up with a couple of computer boxes inside the console replacing a myriad of switches and wires, and then there would be just a few simple cables, a few Ethernet cables that would connect it to similar boxes inside the organ and provide much greater reliability. This picture taken from First Congregational Church at Main and Losi here in La Crosse, a project that our organ builder had completed this past year. In addition, there's some cosmetic work that needs to be done in the balcony and on the console, getting an adjustable bench so that you don't have to be the same size organist as that who'd precede you, a signaling system so the pastor can let the organist know when worship is ready to begin, renovation to the balcony railings, which provide too great an opening that could allow children and others to fall through, and just refinishing the console itself, a piece of furniture that's been in use now for 57 years and just needs to be refurbished. The next part of our organ work would be an updating of the tonal design of the organ. That would involve some repurposing of pipes, possibly adding some additional pipes to enhance the tonal characteristics of our organ. One possibility would be the addition of these horizontal type trumpet pipes, this picture taken from another church, that could nicely enhance our tonal design for our organ. And finally, replacing our existing chime system is something that we have recommended being accomplished. Our present chime system is one that uses vacuum tubes and relies on that 1950s technology to make a synthesized chime sound, but it's a chime sound that is not of sufficient volume to be able to be used very reliably within worship, and we just need to replace that with more modern technology. So each of these elements of the project has some range based on exactly what pieces we include in that project and what the cost is at the time that we proceed with them. So a range of costs can be associated with the organ renovation, costs that range in total from $228,000 to $278,000. So the capital campaign has recommended that we pursue all of these projects and has set as a budget for that $250,000. And as you can see from this photo, taken during daylight hours, there are areas in the pews that are relatively well lit, and other areas immediately adjacent that are quite dark. Andy Stutzman has graciously worked with Photoshop to provide us a sense for what that might look like. The right side of this photo shows a demonstration of what our present lighting might look like, in contrast to the left side where we've had increased lighting and a much brighter look, much easier chance for old eyes to read the church bulletin and the hymns. In addition, Andy has provided us a view at our request of what it might look like if we were to paint sections of our dark ceiling, the flat parts of the dark ceiling, a lighter color and leave us with an even brighter sanctuary. We've not made any firm decisions about whether or not to pursue that, but just want to illustrate what a brighter, more welcoming sanctuary might look like with enhanced lighting and potentially painting of the ceiling. The budget for that, based on our analysis of proposals from a couple of lighting installers, is in the range of $20,000 that's been included in the overall capital campaign. The next project has to do with fellowship hall and kitchen windows. This blueprint image here is from the original 1957 blueprints, and as you can see along the east side of the church, there was a wall of windows that no doubt in 1957 were single panes glass that let a lot of heat out and were subsequently replaced, probably in the early 1980s, with a set of only 4 windows and some higher R value insulating wall in between. These windows from the early 80s are now exceeding their expected lifespan and need to be replaced. This window is in our current kitchen, and you can see there's no opener there. It's been removed because it was broken and not able to be replaced. Rob Hansen left us a little note about that. It said, "Don't use this window," and it's dated March 8th, 2008, already 6 years ago. In addition, some of the fellowship hall windows have controllers that look like this, kind of cracked and battered, and again, those control cranks are no longer available and thus can't be repaired. Thus, we need to replace the windows. Window replacement, based on one proposal that we received, would come to about $15,000, depending on exactly what kind of materials you use and so forth. But from the Capital Campaigns Committee's perspective, $15,000 would do a nice job of getting us updated windows and the trim around them. The next project that we're recommending is renovation and replacement of our outside marquee signs. These 2 signs are what are designed to welcome people to our Saviors as they come to worship. You can see from this picture that even the word worship is a bit crooked because the sign's interior is falling apart, and if we don't do something soon, all of this lettering may end up in the bottom of the sign, completely illegible. There's a fairly substantial crack in the glass there. Fundamentally, these signs don't leave a very welcoming contemporary view of our Saviors. A couple of years ago, we worked with the La Crosse Sign Company to develop some proposals and ideas as to what we might do. That got complicated because the La Crosse City Council has put a moratorium on signs with moving lights in them, and thus these designs do meet that restriction and would cost for a pair of them, one in front of the church and one along the boulevard on 7th Street, the estimated cost being about $18,000. The next project that we'll talk about is the audio-video ministry technology. I'm sure many of you have had to miss worship for a variety of reasons, illness, vacation, or work. You may also know those that are homebound that would like to be in worship as well. We have a number of our members that are in the military and stationed at locations around the country and around the world. There may be some members that are away at college that would be interested in accessing our worship, or there may be some snowbirds, some of our members that work that winter in Arizona, California, or other sunny places that could then connect with our Saviors during the course of the winter. Another opportunity that in audiovisual ministry would allow us to do is if your children were in a Sunday school program or singing for worship, we could connect them through the internet with their grandparents in another state. Finally, we believe that there's a body of potential members that are likely to connect with us on the internet first and kind of try us out in that venue before they would be likely to come to join us in person in worship. And so if we have our worship fully available online, that might be a way for us to connect with those people. In order to make such a system work, we've gotten a proposal from Sim Audiovisual in Winona for sort of an entry-level audiovisual ministry system that would involve 2 or 3 servo-controlled cameras like this, a control board to control those cameras, and a video mixing board, along with some other piece of equipment that would allow us then to either stream the worship live, archive it on a website that could then allow you to stream that worship on your time, and also to create DVDs so that when we take our shut-ins home communion, we could also take with us a DVD that they could then play on a DVD player in their apartment or a residence. So $20,000 is our estimate for the cost that would be associated with getting the equipment to allow us to begin doing this type of ministry. The final project is developing some accessible restrooms. As some of you may have recognized, the only currently marginally accessible restroom is in the kitchen. Thus, those that need to use the restroom need to walk through the food preparation area or wheel with their wheelchair through the food preparation area, and it's not really very handy. Our present 1957 vintage bathrooms on our front hallway do sometimes get used by those with physical limitations. They will sometimes leave their wheelchair behind in the hallway and try to walk in, and are at that point a fall risk and a tragedy waiting to happen right here in our midst. We engaged Borton Construction to see if it would be feasible to place handicapped accessible bathrooms in a number of places in our sanctuary. And our conclusion was that using the existing space for those bathrooms, this drawing coming from the 1957 blueprint, here's the fellowship hall, here's the chapel, and here's our existing bathrooms. Borton believes that they can construct a bathroom that might look something like this in the existing floor print and have it be fully accessible and be able to do so for about $110,000. Using the existing footprint would cause the least amount of structural problems in the process and would give us bathrooms that are large enough to handle the size crowds that we have both on Tuesday night, when there are often more than one person here in wheelchairs, and on Sunday morning. So here is the entire list of projects with the amounts that we've just talked about. As you can see, the total is substantial, $433,000, a big number, but a number that we think is quite doable for our Saviors. We believe that we will be able to raise this amount of money, and in fact will probably exceed that amount of money in the end, and be able to really embrace the future with a very wonderful collection of projects that will enhance our building. Our plan is to do this through a 3-year capital campaign pledge drive. We want to say at the outset that no pledge or gift is too small. We're wanting to involve as many people as we can, regardless of how much they can contribute, because we need to do this project together. Our vision is that these pledges will be over and above your annual operational giving. Our hope is that by having a capital campaign, you won't just redirect funds that you're currently giving for operations to the capital campaign, and then we would have difficulty keeping the lights on because of that redirection of funds. You'll notice that it's a 3-year campaign, but that it spans 4 tax years. That's depicted here on the pledge card, where we've got a 6-month period of time yet this year, and 6 months in the first part of 2017 that are included. So from a tax standpoint, you can use this deduction of your gift over a 4-year time span rather than just the 3. In addition, we want to point out that legacy gifts associated with life insurance or estates, are also welcome, and we'd be happy to meet individually with any member or friend of our Savior's that would like to discuss that type of giving. Well, the capital campaign's already off to a great start. Just this past Saturday, May 3rd, the Church Council met in retreat and reviewed existing funds in the Memorial Fund and has chosen to designate a total of $50,000 to jumpstart the campaign. Thus, more than 10% of the total that we are attempting to raise has already been identified. That's been identified from the other category on your envelopes, where there's been some accumulated funds since the end of our previous capital campaign. There's some residual funds in the sabbatical reserve fund that Pastor Mark wasn't able to use during the course of his sabbatical year. There's an existing organ and piano fund that we're directing some funds for the capital campaign. And finally, the biggest single piece of this $50,000, well over half of it, comes from the Gene Mark estate. So we hope over the course of the next few months to be able to secure pledges to meet and exceed our capital campaign goal. We are already beginning to think about how we will have a celebration of that embrace of the future come September. And we look forward to those wonderful celebrations. But the Capital Campaign Committee doesn't believe that our role will end once those funds are raised. Rather, we are wanting to continue to be involved so that we can evaluate projects, evaluating the funds that have been received, and participate in making some recommendations to the Church Council regarding initiation and staging of projects as funds become available. So we anticipate multiple celebrations over the course of the next few years as we both meet our capital campaign goal and complete projects, the several projects that we've designed here to embrace the future of ministry at Our Savior's Lutheran at 6th and Division. Thanks for your attention.